Thank you, Sandy. Good morning. And welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Door County. It's my privilege to be back here again I've been gone a good share of the winter, but my name is Bob Lindahl. I've been a member here since 2008, and it's my privilege to be your service leader today. Along with all Unitarian Universalists, we as a fellowship celebrate diverse beliefs. We invite spiritual growth, intellectual inquiry, and creative expression. We care actively for the well-being of each other and for the larger community. We practice conscientious stewardship of our earth, upon which all life depends, and we pursue equality and justice for all people. So you are welcome here today. So as we begin, we have a tradition of asking visitors or people who haven't been with us for a while to perhaps stand and introduce themselves if they're comfortable. So do we have anyone in that category today who would like to? Yes.
My name is Gary Overby. Our family goes back almost 100 years here, and I've been meaning to go to a Universalist Unitarian service for a long time. I was in Madison. I never quite made it, but
Okay.
I feel very welcome, and I like the concept.
Great. Well, we welcome you here. Thank you. Anyone else? We welcome the Boyds back. Yes. All right. Anyone else? Okay. So if you have other announcements today, there are announcements, by the way, on the back of your bulletin. But if you have other announcements that you'd like to make, Terry will bring the mic around to you if you raise your hand. So are there any other announcements? Judy?
Judy Brudd, and I'm speaking as an individual.
Yeah.
And I just want you to know that Governor Evers has called another special election for our CD8, our congressional district. And so we have to collect signatures. So even if you've already signed signatures, we need to do it a second time. And Mike will be the Johnny on the spot after the service. Thank you.
What else, Trish?
Oops. I just wanted to share, I have a hot book that seems like if you're on a waiting list someplace, Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride, and I'm here to pass it around. So if you're interested in reading it, see me after church.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes, Charlotte?
I'm giving a program Tuesday at the Ridges Cook Fuller Center at 1:00 for the new Door Garden Club. And they asked me to do a program about conservation mentors of Roy Lucas and Emma Tuft. So you have to go into doorgardenclub.org to learn more about it. But it's just a nice remembrance of the times that I spent with Emma and my life with Roy.
Yes, wonderful. That's wonderful, Charlotte.
Tuesday afternoon at 1:00.
Tuesday at 1:00, and it's at,
There's an admission price.
it's at the Ridges?
Yeah. At the Ridges,
Okay.
you have to go into doorgardenclub.org.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Well, just a couple of items before we go on with our service. A reminder to silence any noisemakers you might have that might disturb us. If you're having difficulty hearing at any time during the service, just raise your hand and we'll be able to adjust the volume so that it's more comfortable for you. Following today's service, we will have our regular talk back here after we've had refreshments. Refreshments will be in the gathering room. After about 15 minutes, we'll ring the chimes again, and we'll meet over in this corner of the sanctuary with Dick to discuss his message. The Speaking of Dick Smythe, we welcome Dick today as our speaker. And Dick is no stranger to us, obviously. Dick is an entomologist, retired from the U.S. Forest Service, and a beloved member of our fellowship. For years, Dick has maintained two different dominant interests. First, his fascination with the natural world, and second, his abiding interest in religion and theology. And we have been often the beneficiaries of his curiosity. So we look forward to what you have to bring us today, Dick. So now we'll begin our service. When an area is struck by an earthquake, a flood, a famine, a devastating fire, or oppression, there's typically an outpouring of international sympathy and support. But while we are looking with pride at our generous response to those suffering disaster, we might also pause to reflect on just how it happens that our sympathy can be so easily changed to hatred. I'll do it the easy way. Applause. So to continue on that thought, how is it that we will predictably reach out to help a given people at a time of need, but as soon as we begin to label the same people the other, we are capable, reluctantly or enthusiastically, to engage in negligence or hateful acts? We will now sing hymn number 1021, Lean on Me. Sometimes in our lives, we all have pain, we all have sorrow, but if we feel right, we all know always tomorrow. On me, you are strong, I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it will be long. I will need somebody to lean on. Please swallow your pride. If I have things you need to borrow, for no one can fill those of your needs that you won't let show. Lean on me, you are strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long. I will need somebody to lean on. If there is a load you have to bear that you can't carry, I'm right up the road. I'll share your load if you just call me. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long. I'm doesn't need somebody to lean on. Call on me, brother, when you need a hand. We'll just need somebody to lean on. Just might have a problem that you understand. We all need somebody to lean on. Okay. Please remain standing for the unison affirmation and doxology. We gather together to seek knowledge and wisdom, to explore freely the vast reaches of mind and spirit, to celebrate within the caring community those truths, ancient and modern, which give meaning and direction to our lives. From all that dwell below the sky, let songs of hope and faith arise. Let peace, goodwill on earth be sung, in every land, by every tongue. Thank you. So our joys and concerns give us that experience that we call living. By sharing those, we can help spread that joy or help ease our own burdens. So does anyone have a joy or concern they'd like to share this morning? Mike Terry will come around to you. Judy.
Judy Brudd. I didn't ask Dick if I could share this with the group, but in our family, he has a wonderful name, and he is called the Bug Guy.
No, okay. Okay.
Amy Maris, this is just something fun. We were doing some landscape work outside here. And when I was weeding out, I found this bunny clutch. I suppose that's the right word. I don't know. But they're in the cranesbill bushes. And it was all these little hairless bunnies hopping around in there. And it was covered with what I thought was a cobweb first. But it was bunny fur, yes. So we have little babies we have to take care of out there.
Okay. Don't plant vegetables out front.
I noticed the highway cleaner uppers as I drove past the other day, and I appreciate it all, but I want everyone to know that this congregation has cleaned up that highway stretch since 1997.
Well, yeah, right. And I understand there we like to look for 8. How many were there, Bruce? 12. Isn't that wonderful? Almost have to send. Yeah. Good. Did you find asparagus? Did you? Okay, that's a good place. Okay. Any others? All right. At this time, we will take our offertory. We would encourage you to give generously to the work of our fellowship. If you prefer to give online, our website is uufdc.org. And now we'll have a moment of quiet, a time for us to clear our mind of distractions so that we might truly hear today's message. A brief reading before the message today. Issues and struggles related to power and oppression do not exist in a vacuum. They cannot be separated from the wider systems and context which fuel and support them. That's why when we talk about building meaningful solidarity, we need to do more than just acknowledge an issue exists. We need to inform ourselves, reach out to the affected communities, build relationships, listen, take action in solidarity, and collectively tackle the root causes by challenging the systems of power that perpetuate these issues. This means not just being present for blockades or demonstrations in moments of crisis, but instead, or also, as be activists, we must sustain multiple, meaningful, and diverse relationships on an ongoing basis.
Neither Mary nor I, even though we were both good students, neither one of us learned anything meaningful about the Great Irish Famine or Great Hunger that lasted for 5 awful years, 1845, 1850. So after discussing the horror of this famine and the extent to which Victorian Britain callously exacerbated it, I will share a story that I would guess is unknown, maybe to all of us. I don't know. It was certainly unknown to Mary and me before our time spent in Ireland last year. This story is almost unbelievable. And it describes the improbable friendship between the people of Ireland and the Choctaw people of the United States. A bond between two peoples based on their shared experiences of colonization, starvation, and suffering. Now, we probably have some understanding, at least, that throughout its history, Ireland, like much of Europe and other parts of the world, was plagued by periodic outbreaks of famine caused by crop failure. Now, these famines typically were of relatively short duration and were pretty localized. The Great Irish Famine, or Great Hunger, was a very, very different story. When the potato blight stuck in 1845, the poor rural population of Ireland was almost completely dependent on the potato for sustenance. And when the potato blight was blighted, and the potato crop was blighted year after year for 5 years, starvation on an enormous scale was the inevitable outcome. From a population of 8 million folks, 1 million died of hunger and diseases associated with starvation, and 1 million emigrated. They left, those that could. Many of them could not, but those that could immigrated primarily to England and North America. And what's particularly meaningful to me, at least, is that the power of the word famine for the Irish was such that it has never again been used to describe any situation of food shortage or crop failure. Now, the Great Famine was shocking for many reasons. One, it was difficult to conceive of the poor of any country, any nation, being solely dependent on one crop. Also, the callousness of the British administration, since Irish was at that time a colony of Great Britain. The British just were completely irresponsible. And remember now, we're talking about a famine not in some far-flung corner of the British Empire. We're talking about famine right next door in the neighboring Ireland to Great Britain. Ireland was at that time England's colony. But remember, because Ireland was or partially at least because Ireland was a British colony, the British commonly thought that people were poor because of their own moral failings. Therefore, conveniently, there was no moral requirement to help the people. And then furthermore, the situation in Ireland was compounded by the harsh portrayal of the Irish in the British press. Articles and cartoons lampooned the Irish as dirty, improvident, indolent, completely unworthy of rescue or help of any assistance. Now, unfortunately, there's still another factor here we have to consider. The Great Famine coincided with the British policy of converting all land to pasture. And any family that owned more than a quarter of an acre of land had to give up everything but that quarter acre of land. Now, presumably, that would qualify the poor for assistance under the Irish Poor Law. But not only was the Poor Law completely ineffective, but no family can subsist, can live, can make it on a quarter acre of land. It's just impossible. Now, that was bad enough. But the British civil servant charged with administering famine relief in Ireland believed, quote, God had sent the famine to punish the feckless Irish, and posterity would surely acknowledge that supreme wisdom has ordained permanent good out of transient evil, unquote. That's the guy that was supposed to be helping the Irish. Now, it's not hard to imagine how effective his efforts at famine relief might have been. And there's still one more awful component to this story. As thousands of Irish citizens were dying of starvation, the British Parliament was steadily exporting enough Irish-grown oats to feed the entire Irish population, year after year after year. And the poor never had access to this source of food, their own food, grown at home. Now, to justify this scandalous behavior, or presumably to justify it, the British government remarked, again a quote, State intervention in the form of famine relief would encourage idleness and lack of self-reliance. So there we go. Now it's almost impossible. I've thought about this for a long time and I've read about it. I just can't conceive of how these Irish families made it. Men, women, and children, again, were dying either of outright starvation or starvation-associated illness. And as many as 500,000 Irish poor were evicted, just thrown out in the countryside with no federal assistance provided. Now you might ask, well, what did these people do? And they did anything they could. Here's some of the responses. Here's how some of the Irish poor, in a sense, made it. Some put some kind of a roof, a tarpaulin if they had it, or a blanket if they didn't, over a ditch, and the family lives in a ditch. Others dug holes in the roadside banks and crawled into these holes to survive. Others erected crude turf huts in wet, muddy, boggy holes. Now, can you imagine living in a ditch? Listen to this. Christmas Eve, 1846. One sympathetic British official described the scene. Again, a direct quote. I witnessed women and little children, crowds of whom were to be seen scattered over the turnip fields like flocks of famished crows, devouring the raw turnips, while the mothers, half naked, shivering in the cold and sleet, were uttering exclamations of despair while their children were screaming with hunger, unquote. And the French journalist, Alexis de Tocqueville, described, quote, a collection of misery such as I did not imagine existed anywhere in the world. The Great Famine has had a lasting effect on the Irish nation. Emigration continued year after year after year and didn't actually tail off till the early 1990s. Now, should anyone doubt the influence of the Great Famine, keep in mind that in 1845, when the famine struck, Ireland's population was just over 8 million souls. Today, 160 years now, not just a couple of weeks, but 160 years later, the population is 5 million. Northern Ireland has a population of 2 million. So even after 160 years, Ireland has not recovered its population that existed in the early 1800s. And I must add, the pain accompanying its former colonization and famine isn't talked about, but it still lies just under the surface. And Mary and I got some inkling of this. It was impossible for me to get a driver's license in Ireland because I was far too old. So we had an Irish driver, native-born Irishman, who became a good friend of ours. He was taking Mary and me somewhere. I don't remember where, but it doesn't matter. And we began noticing Queen Anne's lace along the roadside. So we commented on that. Jerry turned slightly and said softly, "We don't use that name here." And then when we got back to our cottage, I picked up a complete text, thick, about this thick, on the flora of Ireland. Now, this had been given to us for our use, just for our use, which just is another example of the Irish courtesies and many courtesies that were extended to us during our stay in Ireland. So I picked up this book and looked up Queen Anne's lace. Couldn't look it up, it wasn't there. The only way you could find, quote, Queen Anne's lace in that book was to A, know the scientific name, or B, refer to it by its Irish name, wild carrot. Now, actually, wild carrot is a much better name because it does belong to the carrot family, and it obviously grows wild. And also, obviously, has nothing to do with British royalty. So our story now shifts from the misery in Ireland to the accompanying misery in the United States as reflected by the Choctaw Nation. In 1847, 2 years after the start of the Irish famine, little more than a decade had passed since the United States brutally removed the Choctaw from their homelands in Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana, and forced every man, woman, and child to walk 500 miles to what is now Oklahoma. This walk has been called the Trail of Tears. On that walk, the Choctaw lost a quarter of their total population. And these people were not buried, they were just let die by the side of the road and stay there. So now it's March 23rd, 1847, a little town in Nebraska. And several hundred Choctaw folks were camped around the government agency, hungry and destitute and dying of illness. And a meeting was held inside a government building. And in attendance were tribal members, agency officials, missionaries, and traders. Captain Armstrong, reading aloud from a pamphlet, informed the Choctaw about an event taking place on the far side of the Atlantic Ocean, an event of no conceivable, obvious interest to the Choctaw people. Obviously, he was talking about the Great Famine. As far as I can tell, the historical record does not reveal exactly what Armstrong said. And no one has been able to locate the pamphlet from which Armstrong read, but it doesn't matter because we do know. We do know that 177 years ago, Armstrong, an Irish-American friendly to the Choctaw, communicated that mass starvation and land evictions were taking place on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. The exact conditions that Choctaw had just suffered, precisely. Land eviction and starvation. The Choctaw were deeply moved. Some wept. Now, here's an astonishing event. Despite their own impoverished condition and recently dispossessed from their homeland, they somehow rounded up $174, which corresponds today to about $6,500. As the historian Annalise Shout wrote, it is difficult to imagine any people less well positioned to act philanthropically. But the generous response of the Choctaw is well documented and has given rise to the seemingly absolutely improbable deep relationship and friendship between the Irish people and the Choctaw people. In large part, the bond between the two people based on their shared experiences of colonization and starvation. So we have two ancient people, a modern day connection. And now nothing divides the Choctaw people from the Irish except the Atlantic Ocean. Both the Choctaw Nation and the Irish were in effect colonized by outside powers. They almost lost their ancient tongues They almost lost their culture and tradition, but they managed to preserve both the Choctaw and the Irish. Now, the person most responsible for resurrecting this story of what was called the Choctaw gift, quote unquote, was Don Mullen, an Irish humanitarian, author, and filmmaker. And he tracked down the Arkansas Intelligencer, a newspaper in the United States, was one of the first sources to record the gift from the Choctaw to the Irish. And it referred to the, quote, poor Indian sending a mite to the, quote, poor Irish. But what moved him was the context in which this happened. With the Indian Removal Act and the Trail of Tears having subjected the Choctaw to a horrendous brutality at the hands of the U.S. government. But still, they allowed their humanity to supersede any prejudice that they were surely entitled to carry. And there's one ironic footnote to this. This makes it, again, just an unbelievable story. Andrew Jackson was president during the Trail of Tears. He's the one that evicted the Choctaws. And who was Andrew Jackson? He was the son of Irish immigrants. The money collected in Indian Territory that day went to Memphis and then New York, where organizers wrote that it had been, quote, contributed by the children of the forest. Not quite right, but good enough. It was likely used to buy grain and other foodstuffs that were shipped across the Atlantic. And probably, although no one seems to know, probably the Friends, the Society of Friends, who are active in all kinds of relief efforts, they probably distributed the gift in Ireland. And then, for 150 years, it was forgotten, totally forgotten about. So now it's 1989, and Don Mullen was determined to tell a story. And he produced a radio program about the Choctaw gift for Ireland's National Broadcasting Services. As he commented, nobody knew about it in Ireland except maybe some famine historians. But the Irish were moved by the story. And the following year, Mullen visited the Choctaw in Oklahoma. He described it as a lovely reception, and then I'm sure he chuckled as he commented. The Choctaw people were curious as to what in the world this Irish fellow was doing on their doorstep, because, of course, nobody there after 150 years, nobody, the Choctaw then knew anything about this gift. It was unknown to them. So what was this Irish guy doing? And a lesson for all of us today, that spirit of helping others is not only a part of the Choctaw culture, but is a common thread through the culture of many Native Americans. Consider this following anecdote. A Blackfoot lady, Barbara Smith, was teaching a few Blackfoot words to a friend of hers. And Catherine Marlowe, the friend, learned how to say hello in Blackfoot. And then she asked her friend, how do you say thank you? I'm sure there was a slight pause. And then Barbara Smith, the Blackfoot lady, responded this way. That's a little difficult because we don't have a word for thank you in Blackfoot. The way we work is for everybody. Nobody went without. So you didn't have to thank anyone for anything because it was for everybody. Nobody went without. So we don't need and don't have a word for thank you. Can we imagine a nation or a culture with no need for the words thank you? I wonder about that. Now, back to our original story. I had just mentioned that helping others is a big part of Choctaw culture. At that time, though, some of us white folks interpreted such generosity as evidence of the positive influence of white culture. Now, I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed to even say this. But here's what that same newspaper, the Arkansas Intelligencer, reported. Direct quote: "The Choctaw are repaying the Christian world," now get this, "for bringing them out from benighted ignorance and heathen barbarism." The Choctaw artist, White Deer, was much wiser. He dismissed the above comment as absolutely ridiculous. "As I see it," he said, "you have one poor, dispossessed group of people reaching out to another poor, dispossessed group of people. We heard about another people who were suffering much as we had suffered, so we had to help them. Just that simple." In 2018, the Irish Prime Minister visited the Choctaw people, and he made a speech promising the act of kindness would never be forgotten. And he announced a new scholarship program where the Irish would pay for any Choctaw person who wanted to get a higher education and would do so in Ireland. One of the program's recent beneficiaries was Austin West, who arrived in Cook Island in 2021. He was 23 years old. West regards the family gift as a perfect example of Choctaw values. Quote, this is what he said: "Compassion, giving, making sure that everyone is well, that's what it is to be Choctaw. My grandmother was constantly offering food, checking that people had enough to eat." And in the Irish village of Middleton, the Irish-Choctaw relationship is memorialized in a sculpture by an Irish artist. Dominating a small park by a river, gleaming in the sunshine, are 9 20-foot-tall stainless steel eagle feathers, arranged in the shape of a bowl representing a bowl of food. What could possibly be more appropriate for memorializing the Great Famine? And a Choctaw delegation was there. They came to Ireland to celebrate the erection of these eagle feathers. And the name of this, I think it's just absolutely wonderful. The name, very simply, is called Kindred Spirits. Kindred Spirits. The Choctaw transfer student, Wes, replied, "When I come here, it's very reassuring because now I know I'm still connected. I'm not by myself. I'm not separated from my people." This Irish Choctaw story belongs to everyone. It's a powerful story of compassion and generosity, and its lesson is absolutely timeless. One final true story. This now is 2020, and COVID-19 was in full throat across this country and many others. And in our country, and I suspect unknown to most of us, I know it was unknown to me, the death toll in this country was particularly acute among the Navajo people and the Hopi people. The Irish heard about this, and stating that they were, quote, paying it forward, they raised more than $1.8 million to help supply clean water, food, and health supplies to the Navajo and Hopi of the United States. And the Choctaw chief, Gary Benton, remarked, "We are gratified and perhaps not at all surprised to learn of the assistance of our special friends, the Irish, giving to the Navajo and Hopi nations. This is than what he went on to say. Our word for their selfless act means serving those in need. We have become kindred spirits with the Irish in the years since the Irish potato famine. We hope the Irish, Navajos, and the Hopi people develop lasting friendships just as we have. Sharing our culture makes the world grow smaller. So my hope this morning is very simple. I hope that we've perhaps learned something about compassion and generosity. A lesson so vividly demonstrated by the Irish people and the Choctaw people of the United States.
Thank you, Dick, for that challenging message. We'll sing now hymn number 1008, My Heart is in a Holy Place. And if you would turn to that, rise please and turn to that, I'd like to just point out something so that we know where we're headed on this one. But just realize that when we'll sing the three verses, they're always going back to the beginning with the three verses. And then at the end of the third verse, go back to the beginning again, sing to the coda, the top of the second page of the music, sing to the coda, and then go to the coda at the bottom of the next page to finish up. Okay? All right. We'll get it. Okay. Our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, and we trust the wisdom in each other, every color, every creed and tongue, and we feel the faces of each other's heart. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, when we're blessed with love and amazing grace, when our heart is in a holy place, we have a glory from deep inside, and we listen with a loving mind, and we hear the voices in each other's voice, when our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace, when our heart is in a holy place. We shine the fires of a sacred faith, and we run our hearts in faith, and we feel the power of each other's faith. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace, when our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place. Thank you. Be seated. So as Dick has left us with a challenge, this is a challenge in ending our service. If action, regardless of persuasion, is driven by hate and fear, it is wrong. If action is driven by compassion and generosity, it is right. Simple and plain as that.